Hello everyone. I need to rename all of my scenes because I constantly forget which one to use and where they are. My bad. Hello. I'm gonna adjust that a little bit. I think it's a little... I need a bookshelf behind me, not a printer. That looks better. We are using the printer currently. My mom has some things she needs to print, but that should only take a minute, and then we will get to the book reading. Is the music playing? Because I remember I turned it off for... Okay, no, it's playing. Hello, Paul, Natasha, Alexis, Leon, Jeff, Johan. Welcome, welcome. Let me pull this up. Welcome once again to Modal Zushi, or The Untamed, or... Wow, my mouse is freaking out. I just replaced the batteries. Why are you doing this, mouse? I think I need to buy a whole new mouse and keyboard because it's just not working very well. It keeps stopping in the middle of scrolling and it keeps jumping around the screen. Anyway, let me pull this over here. And now I just made it vanish. So that's cool. I guess I don't get to have that. Are you all done?
What's today's date?
It is the 14th.
Alright, thanks. Yes.
Okay. So, to recap where we were last time, we are reading the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, known in Chinese as Mo Dao Zushi. It is the story of a young man named Wei Ying. He is the bad guy. We're kind of reading the book from the perspective of the villain. Many, many years ago, there was this big war and all this bad stuff going on, and Wei Ying was somehow involved and got blamed and was killed. The story begins with him being resurrected from the dead by dark magics. And he is now given a second lease, kind of another chance at life, and is trying to figure out what he's going to do with it. And he keeps bumping into old faces. His brother, his nephew that he never, got to see grow up, an old friend of his, and of course he's in a new body, so nobody really recognizes him. And he's trying to keep it that way, since again, he was the bad guy, a criminal. In the last chapter, he was trying to escape from his brother, who is kind of an enemy of his at this point, and not be taken captive because his brother suspects, this guy's acting weird, he's using the dark magic my brother used, I want to investigate this. And he tries to escape from him and ends up kind of falling into the protection of Lan Wanji, who is an old friend of Wei Ying's. Wei Ying doesn't necessarily he doesn't think they're friends anymore. He doesn't think Lan Wanji is very happy with him because of his whole dark magic stuff. But Lan Wanji says, okay, I'm going to protect you. You're coming home with me. And Wei Ying's like, oh no, now I have to pretend to not be myself while surrounded by the Lan clan, which is like these monks, these very prim and proper cultivators. And so we are at the beginning of chapter 4, where they are heading to the Lan clan. Chapter 4, The Elegant Flirt. The Lan clan residence was located deep within a mountain outside Gusu City. Within the gardens of waterslide pavilions, charmingly dispersed, there were long, endless stretches of black-roofed white walls shrouded in the mountainous mists year-round. To stand within them was akin to standing amidst a transcendent sea of clouds. Fog permeated the early morning, the first rays obscured in haze, complementing its name, the cloud recesses. The mountain was as tranquil as the people were silent, and the mind was made to be still as water. The only sound to be heard was the tolling of the bell from a high tower. While this was no Buddhist monastery, it resonated with the vast emptiness that was whispered from the Zen of Hanshan. However, this stately, meditative scene was abruptly pierced by a long wail. With their morning studies and sword practice interrupted thus, it sent a shudder through the clan disciples, both familial and sect alike. In spite of themselves, they looked to the main gate from whence the sound came. Wei Wuxian was bawling in front of the main gate, clinging to the spotted donkey. Lan Jingyi was reprimanding him. What are you crying for? You're the one who said you like Hung Wanjun. Now that you've been brought back, what's with the blubbering? A question for you. What kind of authors of human philosophy would you recommend? I don't recognize that term. You'll have to define it for me and see if I can help you out. Wei Wuxian was miserable. Ever since that night at Mount Dafan, he'd had no chance at all to re-summon Wen Ning. He'd no chance to figure out why Wen Ning had lost his mental faculties, nor any chance to find out why he had reappeared in the world, before he'd been carried back here by Lan Wangji. When he was younger, he and some disciples from other clans had been sent to the Lan family to study for 3 months, and he had personally experienced the dull dreariness that was the Lan clan of Jusu. Gusu. He still had lingering fears of the Wall of Discipline, which was densely engraved with over 3,000 rules. Just now, as he was being dragged and hauled up the mountain, he had glanced at the stone wall again in passing. There had been 1,000 more rules engraved since, so now it was over 4,000. 4,000! Lan Jingyi admonished him. All right, quiet down. Clamor is prohibited in the cloud recesses. It was precisely because he didn't want to enter the cloud recesses that he was making such an awful racket. Once he was dragged in, it would be difficult to get back out. Back when he'd attended school here, the visiting disciples had each been given a jade travel token. Only with the token could one come and go freely. Otherwise, the protective barrier surrounding the cloud recesses could not be crossed. Over a decade had passed since then, so security could only have grown tighter, not weaker. Lan Wangji stood silently before the main gate, turning a deaf ear and watching on coolly. When Wei Wuxian's voice quieted a little, he said, "Let him cry. Drag him in once he's tired." Wei Wuxian clung to the little spotted donkey and cried even harder. He knocked his head repeatedly against the creature. What misery! He'd have thought that after getting whipped by Zidian, he'd have been cleared of any suspicions. He'd been feeling light and airy, and his lips could never pass up an opportunity to tease, so he'd spoken offhandedly to disgust Lan Wangji. Who would have thought Lan Wangji didn't react to such things like he used to? What logic was this? Could it be that over the years, despite the heights he'd reached in cultivation, he'd only become that much pettier? Wei Wuxian... Oh my goodness. Oh, he wrote in Swedish. I meant human philosophy. Authors of human philosophy. I mean, I'm not very big on philosophy. I really haven't read too deeply into it. I imagine there's got to be textbooks that are easy ways to start out, like the world literature texts I have that have selections. There are philosophy textbooks like that have selections from various people. I've not read deeply into it. My religious courses veered far more towards religion than they did philosophy, and they tend to be somewhat separate. But I'm sure there's, I would start with textbooks. That's usually where I start with. You can find something that collects, a general overview of a topic. Wei Wuxian said, "I love men, you know. Your clan has so many beautiful men. I'm scared I won't be able to control myself." Lan Shizui reasoned with him. "Mo Gongzi, Hong Wenjun brought you here for your own good. Sect leader Jiang wouldn't have stood down unless you came with us. Over the years, countless people have been arrested and taken to the Jiang clan's Lotus Pier. I don't know why I said that weird. And none were ever freed." "That's right," Lan Jingyi said. "You've never seen sect leader Jiang's methods, have you? Super vicious." He stopped when he remembered the Lan clan rule, "Do not speak behind another's back," and snuck a peek at Lan Wangji. Only when he saw that Hong Wenjun had no intention of punishing him did he regain the courage to continue his grumblings. It's all the Yiling patriarch's fault for starting the trend with his evil craft. There are way too many people playing around with that senseless cultivation method of his. And sect leader Jiang is such a paranoid person. Would it even be possible for him to catch them all? Why didn't he take a proper look before suspecting someone like you? Playing the flute like that. That heh said more than 1,000 words. Wei Wuxian very much felt the need to explain himself. Actually, maybe you guys won't believe me, but I usually play the flute all right." He just feels the need to defend his flute playing more than anything else. The Grandmaster / Untamed is one of the best love stories I've ever watched. I've only completed the show. It's so good. So good. And the book, The book and the show are very different universes in a way. Like, they have different twists on them, but I love both equally for what they do. And the book adds a lot of context, I think, and makes things even more interesting. I came to the book after the show, so I'm very fond of the show, but the book is just fantastic. Also, we have a picture here of Wei Ying trying to finagle his way out of being dragged up the stairs. Let me see if I can make my window pop back up. There we go. Before he could finish, several white-clad cultivators stepped out from the grand entrance. They were dressed in the Lan uniform, their simple robes flowing as light and white as snow. The one in the lead was tall and graceful in bearing. At his waist hung a sword and also a xiao of white jade. It's a kind of flute. When Lan Wangji saw him, he gave a light nod in respect, and the man returned the gesture. He then gazed towards Wei Wuxian and smiled. Wangji never brings home guests, and this is... As this man stood face to face with Lan Wangji, they appeared to be mirror reflections of each other, except for the color of their eyes. Lan Wangji's eyes were extremely light, as faint as tinted glass, while the other man's eyes were of a deeper, gentler hue. This was the clan leader of the Lan clan of Gusu, Lan Huan. His sobriquet was... Sobriquet? Don't know why I said that with a hard T. Oh, bye, Johan. Have a good one. His sobriquet was Zhou Jun, and his courtesy name, Lan Shichen. People were a product of their environment. The Lan clan of Gusu had always been renowned as a family who consistently produced handsome men, and the twin Jades born of the head households of this generation were especially striking. While these two brothers had not been born twins, their looks were very similar, and it was difficult to discern who was the superior in appearance. However, they were one color, two shades. Lan Xichen was warm and elegant, sincerely gentle. Lan Wangji was overly aloof and stern, completely unsociable, and kept others at arm's length. This was why, in the rankings for the looks and character of the clan's young masters, the former was ranked first and the latter second. Lan Xichen, I don't know if it's like Zichen or Sich, I think it's an S sound. Correct me if I'm wrong, and you know the correct pronunciation. Lan Xichen was worthy of the title of sect leader. Even at the sight of Wei Wuxian clinging to a spotted donkey, he didn't appear perturbed in the least. Grinning broadly, Wei Wuxian let go of the donkey and approached. The Lan clan of Gusu placed extreme emphasis on seniority and social ranking, so all he had to do was spew sheer nonsense at Lan Xichen, and surely he'd be beaten out of cloud recesses. Yet unexpectedly, just when he was about to demonstrate what he was capable of, Lan Wangji cast him a glance, and Wei Wuxian's upper and bottom lips became inseparable. Remember the spell that they have to silence naughty children? Lan Wangji turned his head and continued to exchange words with Lan Xichen in full seriousness. Xiongjiang. I think that is how it's said. It's like older brother. You again take your leave to visit Lianfang Jun. Lan Xichen nodded. To plan the next symposium at Golden Carp Tower. Wei Wuxian couldn't open his mouth, so he returned to the spotted donkey to stew in bitterness. Lianfang Jun, courtesy name Jin Guangyao, was the current clan leader of the Jin clan of Lanling, and the only illegitimate son Jin Guangshan had ever recognized. Jin Guangyao was also Jin Ling's little uncle, being half-brothers with Jin Ling's father, Jin Xishuan. Jin Guangyao was also the older half-brother, born of another different mother, to Wei Wuxian's current identity, Mo Xuanyu. They were both illegitimate sons, yet the difference between them was night and day. Mo Xuanyu slept on the ground and ate leftovers at the Mo Manor, while Jin Guangyao sat upon the highest seat in the cultivation world, with all those below at his beck and call. He could invite Lan Xichen for a visit if he so wished, could organize a symposium if he so wanted. However, it was no surprise that the two leaders of the Jin and Lan clans shared a close friendship. After all, they were known to be sworn brothers. For those that don't know, sworn brothers is like a major trope in Chinese literature. It originates in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms with these three guys that basically swear to be brothers. It's like really a very deep vow. It can be platonic, it can be romantic, it can be both, where these three people like We're always going to have each other's backs. We're like family, bro. It's very, very important. Shufu has taken what you brought back from the Mo estate for examination, Lan Xichen said. Wei Wuxian's ears perked up at the mention of the Mo estate, but then he felt his lips part. Lan Xichen had removed the silencing spell and turned to Lan Wangji. It is rare for you to bring anyone back home and also to appear so happy. Treat your guest well. Do not be like this. Happy? Wei Wuxian scrutinized Lan Wangji's face. Exactly where did he see that? After watching Lan Xichen leave, Lan Wangji instructed, drag him inside. And so Wei Wuxian was forcefully dragged into the place he'd sworn never to set foot in ever again. In the past, those who came to visit the Lan clan had all been distinguished clan leaders or important figures. They had never received a guest like him, so the juniors jostled as they swarmed him, all finding this both refreshing and fun. If not for the strict clan rules, the trip definitely would have been full of merry laughter. Lan Jingyi asked, Han Guanjun, where do we drag him to? The Tranquility Room, Lan Wangji said. The Tranquility Room? The juniors all looked at each other in dismay, not daring to speak up. Wei Wuxian was left in the dark as to the meaning of their reaction, but the same thought had flashed through all the juniors' minds. But that's the study and bedroom Han Guanjun has never permitted others to enter. The interior of the Tranquility Room was minimalist, without any superfluous decoration. The folding screen was illustrated with paintings of the rolling, ever-changing clouds, done in the realist style of Gongbi, and a guqin table was placed before the screen. In the corner there stood a 3-footed incense table, and an incense burner of hollowed white jade was diffusing swirls of light smoke, filling the entire room with the fresh fragrance of sandalwood. Lan Wangji went to discuss business with his uncle, and Wei Wuxian was pushed into this room. Lan Wangji had only just left when Wei Wuxian took the opportunity to slip out right after. He strolled around the cloud recesses and found that, just as he expected, even if he could scale the multi-meter-high white wall, without the jade travel token, he'd still get thrown down by the rebound of the barrier, and immediately attract the attention of the nearby patrol. And so Wei Wuxian could only return to the Tranquility Room. It has another name, like, obviously that's a translation of its Chinese name. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I'll have to look that up later. It has a very pretty name. He never really got anxious when faced with problems, so he paced back and forth inside the Tranquility Room with his hands folded behind his back, confident he'd come up with a counter-solution sooner or later. The refreshing fragrance of sandalwood was cool and clean, ephemeral and alluring. In his idleness, he mindlessly thought, this is the scent that was on Lanjan. The fragrance probably sank into his clothes with all the time he spends in here practicing his guqin or meditating. With this thought in mind, he couldn't help being drawn in closer to the incense table in the corner. As he moved, he felt a floorboard beneath his foot was conspicuously different from the others. Out of curiosity, Wei Wuxian bent down and started knocking about. He'd done plenty of grave digging and unearthing underground pits and holes in the past, so it didn't take long for him to come across a suspicious panel. It was already shocking enough to Wei Wuxian to have discovered a secret compartment within Lan Wangji's room, but when he saw what was hidden, he became even more astonished. Once he lifted the wooden panel, an aromatic fragrance that was imperceptibly mixed with the sandalwood incense permeated the room. 7 to 8 little round black jugs were revealed, all crammed into this tiny square cellar. Lan Wangji had indeed changed. He was even hiding alcohol now. Alcohol was prohibited at the cloud recesses. It was because of this very rule that the two of them had had a little fight upon their first meeting, during which Lan Wangji spilled a jug of the Emperor's Smile that Wei Wuxian had brought back from Gusu City, which was nestled at the foot of the mountain. After his return to Yongmeng from Gusu, Wei Wuxian never got the chance to taste this famous and exclusive brew of Gusu. It was something that stayed on his mind for an entire lifetime. He'd always said he'd come back and try it if there was a chance, but that never panned out. As for the liquor hidden here, he didn't even need to open the jugs and test their taste. He knew by fragrance alone this was Emperor's Smile. He'd never imagined there'd come a day when Lan Wangji, someone who abided by the rules and never touched a drop of liquor, would have his secret booze cellar exposed by Wei Wuxian. Truly what goes around comes around. Wei Wuxian sighed emotionally as he downed a full jug. He was a heavyweight when it came to tolerance and loved to drink, and since Lan Wangji owed him a jug of Emperor's Smile, he thought he should collect some interest after so many years. Thus he drank another jug. Just as he was beginning to enjoy himself, an idea struck him. How hard could it be to acquire a jade travel token? Within the borders of the cloud recesses, there was a cold spring with a myriad of special effects, serving the male disciples for cultivation purposes. Apparently, it had such effects as the calming of one's mind and the cooling of wicked inflammation. The note here says that wicked or evil fire is a cause of illness in traditional medicine, but also serves as a slang for arousal. So in other words, they're saying that when these very monkish people need to cool off, they go to the cold springs. Clothes were bound to come off when entering the cold springs, so what were the guys going to do with the jade travel token? Dangle it from their mouths? Wei Wuxian clapped and finished the last sip of the jug in his hand. He looked around, but surprisingly did not find anywhere to toss the jugs, so he filled the 2 empty vessels with water and sealed them like they'd been before, then stuffed them back into the cellar and closed the floorboard. Having done the deed, he went out in search of a jade travel token. Although the cloud recesses had been burned down once in the past, before the start of the Sunshot campaign, its layout hadn't changed after the reconstruction. Wei Wuxian relied on his memories to navigate through the quiet, winding paths, and it didn't take long before he found the serene and secluded cold spring. The sect disciple guarding the spring was standing quite a distance away. There was another designated area for the female cultivators, so they didn't use the facilities here, and there was never anyone in the Lan clan who dared do something as shameless as peeping. Thus, security wasn't strict, and was extremely easy to deceive, perfect for Wei Wuxian to go be shameless himself. Just as luck would have it, a set of white robes were laying on top of a white rock behind a thicket of eupatorium grasses. Someone was already here. This set of white robes was so neatly folded it made one's hair stand on end. It was like a square piece of tofu. Even the forehead ribbon was meticulously laid. When Wei Wuxian reached in to rummage for the jade travel token, he almost felt bad messing it up. He casually cast a glance at the spring and suddenly couldn't look away. The water of the cold spring was bone-bitingly freezing. Unlike hot springs, there was no steam to obscure vision, so he had a clear view of the upper back of the man in the spring. The man in the water was tall in build and fair of skin, his hair long and ink black, dripping and gathered to the side. The line of muscle running down his back to his waist were smooth, graceful, and full of power. In short, a beauty. However, Wei Wuxian was most definitely not someone unable to avert his gaze when stunned by a bathing beauty. And it wasn't as if he were actually into men, no matter how beautiful this man was. It was because there was genuinely something in particular on the man's back he was unable to look away. Dozens of crisscrossing scars. These were the type of marks left behind by a discipline whip. Among the cultivation clans, there was a type of discipline whip that was used to punish scion disciples of the head family. It was reserved for those who had committed the most grievous of mistakes, and after such punishment, the scars would never fade. While Wei Wuxian had never experienced this particular lashing himself, John Cheng had. Wei Wuxian had racked his brain to help him lighten that humiliating mark, but all efforts had been fruitless. Wei Wuxian would never mistake the sight of such a scar. You know, I never thought about it, but none of the cultivators have scars, and yet the scars were really a prominent part of the plot line. And in the show, I guess they don't touch on it, but it's a special weapon designed specifically to leave scars. That's really sad. Wish I had a silencing spell while having to deal with customers at work. Yeah, that makes sense. Someone should invent that. Yeah, Wei Wuxian does say that quite a lot, doesn't he? He's like, listen, he's a little too defensive, isn't he? Usually, a couple of lashings from the discipline whip was already a severe lesson, enough to engrave it into one's memory forever, never to commit the same wrongs again. But there were at minimum 30 discipline whip scars on the man's back. What heinous crime had he committed to get whipped like this? And if it was truly so heinous, why hadn't he been executed outright to purge the sect of such corruption? Just then, the man in the spring turned around. Below his collarbone, near the heart, was a conspicuous mark from a branding iron. When Wei Wuxian saw that brand, his surprise reached new heights. The brand had stolen all of Wei Wuxian's attention, leaving none to spare a look at the man's face. It made him question whether his eyes were mistaken. Even his breathing quickened. Suddenly white filled his vision, as if a curtain of snow had dropped. Immediately after that, the snow curtain was slashed by a blue glare of a sword which attacked with a frozen aura. There was not a single person in the world who didn't recognize Hong Wanjun's famous sword, Bichen. Damn, this was Lan Wangji. Wei Wuxian was no stranger to dodging swords and running for his life. He dropped efficiently to the ground and rolled away, just barely dodging. He even had the time to pluck a piece of stray grass from his hair as he fled from the cold spring. As he darted about like a headless fly, he ran into a few people on night patrol and was caught and scolded. What are you rushing around for? The cloud recesses prohibits hurried walking. Not even running. You cannot hurriedly walk. You must stroll everywhere. When Wei Wuxian saw it was Lan Jingyi and company, he was overjoyed, thinking that this presented him with a perfect opportunity to get flogged off the mountain. He quickly offered himself up. I didn't see anything. I was definitely not here to peep at Hong Wanjun bathing. When the juniors heard, they were instantly shocked, speechless by his audacity. Hong Wanjun was revered everywhere, considered a distinguished cultivator never to be profaned. Both juniors and disciples of the clan respected and admired him as if he were divine. To peep at Hong Wanjun bathing in the cold spring! Just the thought of doing such a thing was an irredeemable felony. Lan Shizui was so stricken even his voice changed. What? Hong Wanjun? Hong Wanjun is in there? Lan Jingyi seized him in outrage. Damn cut sleeve! Is this something you think you're allowed to peep at? While Wei Wuxian struck the iron while it was hot and confirmed his own crimes. I saw neither hide nor hair of Hong Wanjun's naked body. Lan Jingyi exclaimed furiously. You just gave yourself away. What are you sneaking around here for if you didn't peep? Look at you, utterly shameless. Wei Wuxian covered his face. Come on, don't be so loud. The cloud recesses prohibits clamor. Amidst the chaos, Lan Wangji emerged from the thickets of eupatorium grasses draped in a white robe, with his hair long and flowing. While they were arguing, he'd already redressed himself in a neat and tidy fashion, but Bichen was yet to be sheathed. The juniors hurriedly bowed. Lan Jingyi quickly said, Hong Wanjun, this Mo Xuanyu is truly despicable. You brought him back because of his assistance at the Mo estate, but he... Wei Wuxian thought surely he'd crossed the line enough to get kicked out this time. But unexpectedly, Lan Wangji only cast a nonchalant glance his way. After a moment of silence, Bichen was sheathed with a resonant shing. Everyone dismissed. 2 simple words, yet spoken with extreme authority and without room for objection. The crowd immediately dispersed. As for Lan Wangji, he calmly and leisurely picked Wei Wuxian up by the back of his collar and dragged him all the way back to the Tranquility Room. This moron. In Wei Wuxian's previous life, the two had been similar in stature, both slender in build and notably tall in height. Back then, Wei Wuxian had only been shorter than Lan Wangji by a tiny bit, and when they'd stood side by side, the difference had been barely noticeable. However, the situation had changed when he was roused back to life in this body. While he was still considerably taller than average folk, he was more than a full 5 centimeters shorter than Lan Wangji. Caught in his grip, he couldn't even struggle. Wei Wuxian staggered, ready to scream, yet Lan Wangji coldly reprimanded him. Noisemakers will be silenced. Throw him out of the mountain! Yes, please! Silence him? No thank you. Wei Wuxian just couldn't figure it out. Since when had the Lan clan started tolerating such shameless crimes as peeping at their most distinguished cultivator in the bath? Was that even something that could become tolerable? Lan Wangji carried him into the Tranquility Room and went straight for the inner chamber, throwing him onto the bed with a thump. Wei Wuxian AO'd as he landed, and couldn't get up for a moment, squirming as he did. He had the thought to whine coquettishly to raise Lan Wangji's hackles, but when he looked up, Lan Wangji was looking commandingly down at him, standing there with Bichen in hand. This man's first instincts is always to flirt, to be coquettish, he is so repressed. He don't even realize, how should I get my way with this beautiful, handsome man? I should obviously flaunt my looks and be coquettish and like this man. Such a repressed bottom. He was used to seeing Lan Gongzi with his hair and forehead ribbon fastened, orderly and Why am I messing up on words constantly when reading? Mythological. My dyslexic ass is now failing to read English words that I should know because they're my language. I don't know the word. We're skipping it. Not a single hair out of place. The sight of him now, slightly loose black hair, thinly robed, was something he'd never witnessed before, so Wei Wuxian couldn't help but take a look or two. In the midst of the dragging and throwing, Lan Wangji's tightly closed collar had been tugged askew, revealing his defined collarbone as well as the dark red brand mark below. At the sight of the brand mark, Wei Wuxian's attention was stolen again. He'd had an identical mark on his body too, before he'd become the Yiling Patriarch, and the one on Lan Wangji now was no different from the one Wei Wuxian had had in his former life, in place or shape. It was no wonder it looked familiar and not strange at all. Speaking of, it wasn't the only brand mark that was strange. There were also the 30-some lash marks from the discipline whip on Lan Wangji's back. From a young age, Lan Wangji had made a name for himself. He was highly commended and the most orthodox of the distinguished orthodox cultivators, one of the twin jades in whom the Lan clan of Gusu possessed intense pride. His every word and action were regarded by the elders as the benchmark for discipline excellence. So what unforgivable crime had he committed to garner such a severe punishment? Over 30 discipline whip scars, was literally being lashed to death. And once the scars were on the body, they would remain for a lifetime. It was so the punished would forever remember their crimes, never to commit them again. Following his gaze, Lan Wangji lowered his eyes and tugged at his collar, concealing his collarbone and hiding the scars. He was once more the cold-as-ice Hung Wanjun. Just then, the somber tolling of a bell sounded from the distance. The rules of the Lan clan were strict, their daily routine rigid. Rest at high time, the beginning of night, and rise at Mao time, the morning twilight. The toll of the bell served as a reminder. Lan Wangji listened closely until the tolling ended, then turned to Wei Wuxian. "You will sleep here." He turned into the room next door without giving Wei Wuxian time to respond, leaving him sprawled on the bed, alone and confused. It wasn't like he hadn't considered the idea that Lan Wangji had guessed who he really was. It was just that such suspicion made no sense from him. The sacrificial ritual was forbidden magic. Those who knew of it were extremely few in number to begin with. Over the years, any written knowledge passed down was at best fragmentary passages without any practical use. Practitioners of such magic dwindled more and more as time passed. Who knew where Mo Xuanyu had gotten his hands on those secret manuscripts in order to summon Wei Wuxian? There was no way Lan Wangji could have recognized him solely based on the bit he'd played on that crappy flute, could he? Wei Wuxian didn't think he'd shared any sort of deeply consequential friendship with Lan Wangji in his past life. While they had been peers once, had had narrow escapes together and fought side by side, their meetings and partings had always been as swift as petals carried by flowing water. Lan Wangji was a disciple of the Lan clan of Gusu, and that predetermined him to be elegant and righteous without fault, completely incompatible with Wei Wuxian's personality. Wei Wuxian felt their relationship couldn't have been called bad, but he could hardly pretend it had been good. He figured Lan Wangji's appraisal of him would be the same as that of the prevailing public opinion. Wicked and unethical, with wanton indulgence for massacre, a disaster in the making sooner or later. After Wei Wuxian defected from the Jiang clan of Yangmeng and became the Yiling Patriarch, he'd been in significant conflict with the Lan clan of Gusu, especially in the months prior to his death. If Lan Wangji really was certain he was Wei Wuxian, they should surely have been brawling to the ends of the earth by now. And yet he didn't know if he should lament the current state of things. In the past, Lan Wangji had been unable to tolerate a single thing he did. And now Wei Wuxian had done everything in his power to stir up trouble, and the man just endured it. Could it be that this was the result of years of great progress? Well then, congratulations! After taking a little while to despair and stare blankly at nothing, Wei Wuxian rolled off the bed and moved extremely quietly to the next room. Lan Wangji was lying on the bed, seeming to be in deep slumber already. Wei Wuxian approached soundlessly. He still hadn't given up. He was ready to feel up the man and see if he could fish out that jade travel token that had so stubbornly eluded his endless yearning. Yet unexpectedly, just as he reached out, Lan Wangji's long lashes quivered and he opened his eyes. At that moment, Wei Wuxian made a decision and threw himself on the bed. Wei Wuxian, you have to stop making decisions. You clown! He remembered that Lan Wangji despised physical contact with others. Just a touch had sent him flying in the past. If the man could endure this as well, he was definitely not Lan Wangji anymore. Frankly, he suspected Lan Wangji was also possessed. Wei Wuxian straddled Lan Wangji, his legs spread wide and bent along the man's sides, his hands pushed against the wooden bed, trapping Lan Wangji between his arms as he slowly lowered his face. The distance between their faces narrowed, growing closer and closer, so close Wei Wuxian was practically suffocating before Lan Wangji finally spoke. Lan Wangji said, after a moment of silence, "Get off." "No," Wei Wuxian replied, thick-skinned even now. A pair of light-colored eyes met Wei Wuxian's own gaze. They were barely inches apart. Lan Wangji stared unflinchingly at him and repeated, "Get off." "Nope," Wei Wuxian said. "You should have expected something like this would happen when you made me sleep here." "Like this? Are you certain?" Lan Wangji questioned. For some reason, Wei Wuxian felt this was a question he had to consider carefully before answering. Just as he was about to curl his lips, he suddenly felt his waist go numb, his legs weakening, and then his entire person collapsed onto Lan Wangji. That curve had not yet formed on his lips and froze as his head landed on the right side of Lan Wangji's chest. He was completely immobile. Lan Wangji's voice sounded from above. His voice was low and deep, his chest vibrating gently with the enunciation of his words. "Stay like this tonight, then." Wei Wuxian had never expected this to be his fate. He jerked, wanting to get up, but his lower body remained limp and powerless, that he could do nothing but remain stuck firmly on the hard body of another man in such an embarrassing position. He was completely dumbstruck. What happened to Lan Wangji after all these years? Why is he like this now? Is he still the same Lan Wangji from the past? He's the one possessed, right? Just as he was embroiled in internal turmoil, Lan Wangji suddenly raised himself up a bit. Wei Wuxian perked up, thinking he'd finally had enough. Yet unexpectedly, Lan Wangji only gave a light wave of his hand, and the candle was extinguished. And there is a lovely image. You played yourself. Oh, you moron, you played yourself. See, it's scenes like this that weren't in the show that just... perfection. Amazing. I think the anime had this scene, but just, or Donghua is the term, but... what a moron! I love him! Both of them are like... they're so close yet so far to understanding. Like, they are flirting without being certain the other one is flirting, or even maybe consciously realizing they're flirting. These dumb babies. When Wei Wuxian reflected on it later, the start of his poor relationship with Lan Wangji could probably be traced back to the year when he was 15. That was when he and Zhang Cheng went to the Lan clan of Gusu to study for 3 months. There was a highly respected and reputable elder named Lan Qiren in the Lan clan of Gusu. Among the distinguished clans, he was publicly recognized to have 3 major traits: pedantry, pertinacity, and proficiency in producing peerless pupils from his strict instruction. The first 2 items kept many at a respectful distance, indeed even made some secretly abhor him, but the latter item made many others stop at nothing to finagle their children into his classes. Over the years, he'd raised countless exceptional Lan disciples. Anyone educated under him for a couple years, no matter how terrible they were going in, would appear decent coming out. Or at the very least, their poise and etiquette would see considerable improvement. Many parents wept streaming tears of excitement when they picked up their sons upon completion of their tenure. To that, Wei Wuxian posed the question aloud, "Do I not appear decent enough already?" With great foresight, Zhang Cheng replied, "You will definitely become a mark of shame on his teaching career." Aside from the Jiang clan of Yongmeng, there were plenty of other young masters from other clans that year, all of whom were sent by parents who admired the reputation of the establishment. These young masters were all no more than 15 or 16 years of age. The prominent clans often dealt with one another, so while the students weren't necessarily close, they knew each other's faces. Everyone knew that although Wei Wuxian wasn't surnamed Zhang, he was the clan's chief and eldest disciple. It was also known he was the son of an old friend of Zhang Fengmian, and the clan leader of the Jiang clan of Yongmeng, and that Jiang Fengmian, saw him as his own child. Young people often didn't care about backgrounds and blood as much as their elders, so they quickly mingled, calling each other Gege and Didi after only a few words had been exchanged. Gege means like big brother, Didi is little brother, so they're becoming friendly. Someone asked, "The Lotus Pier of the Jiangkling must be so much more fun than this place, right?" Wei Wuxian laughed. "Whether something's fun or not all depends on how you play. There's definitely not so many rules, though, and no need to get up so early." The rise at Mao and rest at high time routine of the Lan clan of Gusu was not to be disrupted. Someone else asked, "When do you guys usually get up? When do you rise every day?" Jian Cheng humphed. "Him? Rise at sea, rest at show, and he doesn't practice his sword or meditate when he gets up. Instead, he's off boating, swimming, picking lotus pods, and hunting pheasants." A boy exclaimed, "I'm going to school at Yangmeng next year. Don't anyone stop me." His spirits were immediately dampened by another. "No one's stopping you. Your older brother will break your legs, that's all." That boy wilted instantly. This was the second young master of the Ni clan of Qinghe, Ne Huasong. Huaisong. It's like a W sound, I believe. His older brother, Ni Mengui, was a man who was swift and resolute in action, reputed for his might within the cultivation world. Although the brothers were not born of the same mother, they shared a close relationship. Ne Mengui was extremely strict when it came to educating his little brother and was deeply concerned with his studies. This was why, although Ne Huasong greatly admired his older brother, he also feared Ne Mengui bringing up the subject of schooling the most. "Gusu is actually pretty fun too," Wei Wuxian said. "Wei Xiong, listen to my heartfelt advice," Ne Huasong said. "The cloud recesses can't be compared to Lotus Pier. Now that you've come to Gusu, remember to never provoke a certain person." "Who?" Wei Wuxian asked. "Lan Qiren?" "Not the old man," Ne Huasong replied. "The one you have to be careful of is his favorite disciple, Lan Zhan." "Lan Zhan of the Twin Jades of Lan, courtesy name Lan Wangji?" Wei Wuxian asked. The current clan leader of the Lan clan of Gusu had two sons, Lan Huan and Lan Zhan. Enjoying fame as the Twin Jades of Lan, they had been used since the age of 14 by the elders of various clans as role models to compare their own disciples to. Standing squarely under the limelight thus, their names resounded like thunder in everyone's ears. Ne Huasong continued, "And that Lan Zhan, he's the same age as us, but he's not lively as a boy should be, stiff and strict. He's the same as his Shufu or worse." "Oh," Wei Wuxian said. "Is he a pretty good-looking fellow?" Jian Cheng snickered. "Who among the lands of Gusu is ugly? When it comes to enrollment, the clan rejects disciples who don't have proper facial features, you know. Find me one with an average-looking face and show me." "Particularly handsome," Wei Wuxian stressed and gestured to his head. "Dressed in all white with a forehead ribbon and a silver sword on his back. Very pretty, but all stiff in the face, like he's mourning at a funeral." "That's him," Ne Huasong confirmed. Then after a pause, "But he's been training in seclusion and only just returned yesterday. When did you see him?" "Last night." Last night? Jian Cheng was stunned. "There's a curfew at the cloud recesses. Where did you see him? How come I didn't know?" "Over there." Wei Wuxian pointed. The place he pointed at was a high eave. Everyone was speechless. Jian Cheng's eyes were bulging and he gritted his teeth. "Causing trouble from the moment you get here. What happened?" Wei Wuxian grinned widely. "Nothing happened. Didn't we pass by that Emperor's Smile liquor store on the way over? Last night I tossed and turned and finally couldn't hold it in anymore, so I went back down the mountain to town and bought 2 jugs back. There's nowhere to drink that in Yangmeng, you know." "Then where's the liquor?" Jian Cheng demanded. "Well, didn't I just hop over the eaves and get caught by him before I even got a leg on the other side?" Wei Wuxian replied. "What luck, Wei Xiong," one of the boys said. "He was probably patrolling after coming out of seclusion and you got caught red-handed. Those who return at night are not permitted to enter until the end of Mao time, so why did he let you in?" Jian Cheng questioned. Wei Wuxian shrugged. "He didn't. He was demanding I remove the leg I put over. How could I do that, right? So he came up on the roof, airy and light, and demanded to know what was in my hand." Jian Cheng only felt his head throb. He had a bad feeling about this. I never quite understood what courtesy name meant. Okay, so in ancient China, possibly, I don't know if other places did this as well, there was like a tradition of like a name you use in public and a name that you use personally. So like if I work at a company, or like out in public, like to somebody that's kind of just like a stranger or a passing acquaintance, I have a public name that I use with them. But with like my bestie or my husband or my like they would call me by my personal name. So it's no longer a thing done in the modern era, but in this case, courtesy name is like public name. The other name, the personal name, is like what your friends and family use. Which is part of what Wei Wuxian being so like unorthodox and strange. He uses Lanzhan's personal name very early when even Lanzhan isn't really sure how to feel about him or like him or what have you. And he's very overly friendly with him. I don't even think he realizes he's flirting. John Chang only felt his head throb. He had a bad feeling about this. How did you answer? Wei Wuxian replied, It's Emperor's Smile. I'll share a jug with you, so pretend you never saw me. Okay? Chun Cheng sighed. The cloud recesses prohibits liquor. Now you're doubly guilty. He told me the same thing, too, Wei Wuxian said. So I asked him, why don't you tell me what your family doesn't prohibit? He seemed a little angry and told me to go look at the wall of discipline at the front of the main gate. Honestly, over 3,000 rules, written in ancient script no less. Who's gonna read it? Did you? Did you? Either way, I didn't. What's there to be angry about? That's right. The group felt the same way. They started complaining about the various outdated, unfathomable rules of the cloud recesses, deeply regretting they hadn't met each other sooner. Whose clan has over 3,000 rules without any repetitions? Never mind the killing prohibited, private fights prohibited, promiscuity prohibited, night outings prohibited, clamor prohibited. But I can't believe there's also laughing without reason prohibited, improper sitting prohibited, eating more than 3 bowls of rice prohibited? Wei Wuxian cut in quickly. What, private fights are forbidden too? John Cheng said, Yes, please don't tell me you fought with him. I did, Wei Wuxian admitted, and knocked over a jug of Emperor's Smile, too. The group slapped their thighs and exclaimed regretfully about what a shame that was. The situation couldn't get worse either way, so John Cheng changed focus. Didn't you get 2 jugs? Where's the other one? I drank it. Where'd you drink it? John Cheng asked. In front of his face. I said, all right, if the cloud recesses prohibits liquor, I won't go in. I'll drink it on top of the wall. That's not breaking the rules, right? And then I drank every last drop in front of him. And then Wei Xiong, Ne Huasong was utterly shocked. You're so arrogant. Wei Wuxian arched his brows. Lanzhan's skills are pretty good. You're dead, Wei Xiong. Lanzhan has never suffered such grief from anyone before. He's never going to take his eyes off you now. You better watch out. Lanzhan may be in the same classes as us, but he's in charge of punishment in the Lan clan. Wei Wuxian wasn't scared in the least. He waved dismissively. What's there to be scared of? Didn't they say Lanzhan is a child prodigy? If he's so precocious, then his Shufu should have taught him everything by now, and he should be spending his days in secluded cultivation with any free time to keep an eye on me. Before he finished, the group rounded the corner of a garden-windowed wall and saw a white-clad youth sitting poised and proper within the orchard room. His long hair and forehead ribbon were fastened, and the air around him seemed to be shrouded with icy frost. He shot them a frigid look. It was as if dozens of mouths had been suddenly struck by the silent spell. They quietly entered the orchid room, quietly picked out their seats, and quietly left alone any free seats around Lan Wangji. John Cheng tapped Wei Wuxian's shoulder and whispered, His eyes are on you. Best of luck. I think that's probably where we're going to stop it. It seems like a good moment, because otherwise we're going to get into the long portion about the schooling. Just love how dumb they are. And one of my favorite things about the book that the show wasn't able to do is the way that it bookends the various experiences. It shows you a moment from the past here, a moment of the modern times here, and kind of splits it back and forth, so you get kind of a piecemeal, like puzzle pieces that you put together to see the full picture, where the show, that would have been pretty hard to do, so they just did the whole timeline in timeline order, which is fine, and I understand why they did it, but there's just something very refreshing about the book where it's like, okay, this is what their school days were like. What happened next, I wonder? And then it's going to take you back and kind of thread it all together. And it's so fascinating to see the differences. You know, this is what Lan Wangji is like now. But then back when he was 15, he was such a little, stiff little grouch. I love it. And of course, all these rules and the stuff. The Lan clan is really heavily influenced by Buddhism, and their original founder was a monk, and like all the rules they follow are literally like just rules that Buddhist monasteries follow. So like obviously 15-year-old children are like, this is boring. I don't want to do this. I just find this part adorable, and they are so cute and so oblivious to each other, and I love them so much, and I cannot wait to continue reading it all with you. If you are interested in listening to more of this, the second channel is linked in the description and has all the other book readings, including the other 2 books by this author, who we will continue soon, since I think soon the next portions are going to be out. We are about a third of the way through this book, and then there's one more Grandmaster book that's out now, so we will read through those. Should be done in a month or 2 with this one, I think. And then we'll go back to maybe Scum. I don't remember which one comes out first. Whichever comes out first, we'll go to read that first. So I'm going to go work on some things. If I have the time, I may stream a game later, but no guarantees. We'll see what I get done. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Is it doing anything?